I will be the Vampire Lestat for all to see. A symbol, a freak of nature, something loved, something despised, all of those things. I tell you, I can't give it up. I can't miss. And quite frankly, I am not in the least afraid. The Night King reclined, silent but attentive, on his throne. The feeble moans arising from the man who stood very still on the damp flagstones before him meant as little to him as the bleating of sheep. The prisoner's hands were bound tightly behind his back, and his body was wrapped in razor-sharp metal wire that bit deeply into his exposed skin each time he moved. The man's only hope of avoiding excruciating injury was to remain absolutely still. But the exposed red gashes that peeked from beneath his torn clothing gave testimony to his failure. Droplets of his blood already stained the floor of the Night King's audience chamber. The Court of Night, the quartet of vampire aides who served as extensions of Orbach's will, looked on appreciatively at the grim sport and hungrily at the appetizing crimson stain that grew slowly, drop by drop, at the foot of their master's throne. Leaning forward slightly, the Night King began to speak. Clayleen of Tesia, you have betrayed the Night Masks. Yours was a simple task. You were charged with reporting the movements of one Pendrith, bead forger of the Astorians Guild, to your cell leader. Yet you failed because you allowed yourself to be purchased with gold offered by the very target you were sent to observe. The Court of Night stands witness to your confession. Receive now the punishment you have earned. Orbach raised a pale, languid hand and spoke a single word, invoking the art of which he was a true master. Instantly the prisoner began writhing, and it was clear to the onlookers that he was attempting to dance in place. Unable to control his own movements, the man could not prevent the wire from doing its unspeakable work. His blood spattered against the floor, the walls, and the vampires, who wiped it from their clothes and skin, then licked it from their fingers with greatly satisfying relish. The man's anguished screams rose to the vaulted ceiling of the underground chamber in a crescendo of agony that died to a faint whimper, and then silence. Chapter 1. Masks in the Dark. The Night Masks is a powerful thieves' guild that operates out of the metropolis of Westgate on the Dragon Coast. The term Thieves' Guild is something of a misnomer, because theft is the least of the Night Masks' numerous illegal activities. Engaged in such illicit but lucrative trades such as assassination, extortion, smuggling, blackmail, and kidnapping, the Night Masks control Westgate's underworld. Operating mainly at night, guild operatives haunt the city's shadowed streets, sometimes clashing with the city watch. Armed adventurers and private soldiers in the employ of the city's nobles. These nobles, whose houses comprise the leading merchant interests in the city, ostensibly rule Westgate through a ruling council. The head of each family, 10 in all, sits on the council and represents his house's views and wishes on all aspects of the city's administration. It is no secret that these families are economic competitors, and that they have been engaged in a semi-covert power struggle against one another for as long as the council has existed. Virtually all of Westgate's citizenry, as well as those in other lands, believe that the council actively opposes the depredations of the Night Masks. This appearance is a deception, one of many crafted with care by the leaders of the Thieves' Guild to obscure its true purpose. The Night Masks' leadership directly controls 3 of the noble houses and is using them to further its own goals. It intends to control the remainder and much more in time. In addition, the Night Masks have also gained indirect control of some of the city's institutions, including the dock operations, which are vital to the guild's smuggling endeavors. If the general populace of Westgate knew the truth about the city's power structure, they might find it difficult to believe that an organization composed entirely of criminals, even an organization as well organized and skilled as the Night Masks, could bring such a wealthy and powerful city under its thumb. Under normal conditions, they would be correct. However, the key to the Night Mask's political manipulations does not lie with the group's ordinary members or with its usual criminal activities. For all their greed and viciousness, the evil committed by the majority of the guild members pales in comparison to that contemplated by their unseen masters. The common thugs, burglars, thieves, and cutthroats who make up the bulk of the Night Mask's membership believe themselves ruled by an anonymous guildmaster called the Faceless. While it is true that such an individual does exist, these same guild members, as well as most of the citizenry, would almost certainly flee the city if they knew his true nature or understood his goals. The true ruler of the Night Masks is the Court of Nightmasters, a coven of powerful, ruthless vampires who harbour ambitions far darker than the mere clandestine subjugation of a single city. The leader of this group, the Night King himself, who also holds the title of Faceless, is a vampire who replaced the infamous wizard Manshun of the Zentarim. Chapter 2. History of the Mask. The Night Masks have been a part of Westgate's history since 1353 DR, when the first Faceless assembled a band of assassins, thieves, and enforcers to gain control of the city's fractious underworld. Following their master's directives, the guild members quickly extinguished or absorbed all the criminal organizations that opposed them. The consolidated organization began competing with the merchant houses for control of the city's illegal activities. The merchant houses struck back, and the resulting conflict became a semi-secret street war that lasted nearly 2 decades before the Night Masks gained the upper hand. The Thieves' Guild suffered a near-fatal setback in 1368 DR, when Alias of Westgate and Dragonbait, a Sorial paladin, were engaged to curtail the Night Masks' activities. The Harpers and their allies managed to eventually unmask the Faceless, the second to hold the title, and significantly disrupt his group's operations. Unwilling to admit defeat, the Faceless attempted to proclaim himself King of Westgate, but was slain. Shortly thereafter, the guild might have perished then for lack of competent leadership, or torn itself apart with infighting, as several of the remaining members scrambled for control of the group's various operations. But in 1369 DR, a new Faceless arose to quell these internal conflicts and restore the Night Masks to their previous strength. It has always been the custom that the general membership of the guild does not know the true identity of the Faceless, though some holders of the title have been less secretive than others. Each new Faceless must prove himself capable of leadership through actions rather than words. The individual who rose to claim the title when the guild faced its darkest hour encountered few obstacles on his path to becoming the new Faceless. The guild was in a near-total state of disarray following the death of its last leader, and was hungry for new leadership, particularly when that leadership was demonstrated in the face of adversity. Some limited dissent in the ranks provided the aspirant to the Faceless title the opportunity to show his mettle. Those who objected to his ascension or sought it for themselves were murdered in spectacularly gruesome fashion, often inside what they had supposed were their well-guarded private quarters. One rival was reportedly struck down only hours after he announced his intentions to a group of his comrades who were enjoying an evening in the Purple Lady Fest Hall. Dozens of witnesses watched, horror-struck, as he was literally torn apart in the street outside the establishment by a massive swarm of frenzied dire bats. One of his henchmen hastily scooped what little remained of the unfortunate man's corpse into a helmet and brought it to a nearby guild safehouse to report the incident. The new Faceless was accepted by all shortly thereafter. The Faceless chose not to reveal to his new minions that he was a vampire. He had used the abilities granted by his undead condition to obtain information about dissenters and rivals and then kill them. Being able to take on gaseous form is a very effective means of entering otherwise impenetrable areas, and the ability to summon the creatures of the night to do one's bidding makes for a novel form of execution. But even if the guild had somehow learned the truth about the Faceless's nature, there was no way the members could know that he was no ordinary vampire. He was also one of the few surviving stasis clones of the infamous Manchun, erstwhile leader of the Zentarim. He had awakened in the catacombs beneath the city just as the Manchun Wars began, only to discover that prior to his revival, he had been abducted and drained by the vampire Orlak, the self-proclaimed Night King who laired beneath Westgate. The clone's first act upon rising was to hunt down and destroy his creator, taking the title for his own and adopting the name Orbak. Ensconcing himself in his predecessor's underground lair, Orbak contemplated his goals and plans for the future. But as he pondered his situation, emerging from the Undercity only to hunt and feed, he found his actions influenced by a surprising manipulator. Among the treasures he inherited from his slain creator was the Magascepter and a pair of powerful magic items, the Argral of Orlak and the Flying Fangs of the Night King. The Argral was an enchanted drinking goblet that filled with the fresh blood of any victim that had been slain by its companion piece, the Flying Fangs. This was a magic weapon that drained life energy from its victims, as well as blood. Both were imbued with some part of their creator's essence, and they worked in tandem to influence whoever possessed them. The vampire clone found himself feeling an inexplicable but deep-seated need to be served by beings of a similar nature. By the time his research discovered the source of this compulsion, he had already used the Argral and the Fangs to create several servitor vampires and dubbed them his court of Night Masters. Not desiring to waste potentially useful resources, and fully aware that good help is hard to find, Orbak did not eliminate his servitor vampires. After a period of observation in the city, he decided his first act would be to claim leadership of the Night Masks and revitalize the guild. He and his court would be the secret rulers of the organization, reshaping it to suit their own ends. Chapter 3: Organization of the Mask. From the group's inception, an anonymous guildmaster and his inner council of lieutenants have ruled the Night Masks. The Faceless traditionally wield supreme authority over the entire guild, but delegates responsibility for the organization's various activities and interests to the Night Masters, who in turn employ a retinue of assistants, agents, and flunkies to carry out their will. The majority of the rank-and-file membership consists of rogues and assassins. The guild also counts among its members a number of clerics, fighters, sorcerers, wizards, and a smattering of other professions as well. Not everyone on the Night Mask's payroll is a full-fledged member. Many, particularly those who collect information for the guild in distant cities, are freelance operatives. The Faceless has the prerogative to structure the guild as he pleases. Each successive Faceless has reorganized the guild's hierarchy to suit himself, though all the holders of the title have retained the core administrative elements of the Faceless and the Night Masters, regardless of what other changes he wrought. Orbak has, in his turn, redefined the organizational structure to both reflect his personal leadership style and better achieve his goals. The current hierarchy begins with the Night King himself at the apex of the structure. 4 senior members of the Court of Night Masters, the Dukes, report directly to him. Next are the Counts, each of whom reports to one of the Dukes. Each Count has a number of lieutenants who deal directly with the rank and file of the organization. The general membership is differentiated into cell-like units that deal only with those members immediately above and below them in the hierarchy. This structure makes it very difficult for a given member of the Thieves' Guild to identify any of his fellow members who are not in his cell, diminishing the risk of exposure throughout the entire organization. The number of street-level members once numbered almost 2,000, but Orbak trimmed that number down within a year of becoming the Faceless, eliminating almost 800 persons that he considered to be non-essential, including a range of those discovered to be disloyal. The current Faceless prefers to exercise indirect control over the elements of Westgate that are currently under his thumb, and he expects his minions to do the same. While it is possible for a vampire to simply use his domination ability to get a mortal to do his bidding, as the Night King has done with Lady Thistle Thalavar, he considers this technique both inelegant and risky if used too frequently. It takes a strong will to dominate a mortal so thoroughly that he or she neither disobeys commands nor shakes off the vampire's control. To minimize the risk of failure and exposure, the Night King prefers that his servitor, vampires and their progeny, work through intermediaries whenever possible. It isn't necessary to dominate the Harbour Master, for example, when, by working through agents, a vampire can bribe, threaten, or blackmail him just as effectively without revealing anything of his true nature or motivations. The Count of Storms need not meet personally with the Harbour Master in order to make sure that eyes look the other way when a certain ship unloads a certain smuggled cargo on a certain night. Instead, he can work through intermediaries to make sure that the Harbour Master receives a little something in return for having his men absent from a particular dock at a particular time on a particular day. Likewise, the Count of Coins need not meet personally with a client at the Purple Lady Fest Hall in order to blackmail him regarding his egregious gambling habits. He can have any one of a dozen intermediaries do so, giving himself plausible deniability. The Nightmasters, on the other hand, do sometimes meet personally with and dominate the heads of the noble houses they control. They normally resort to such direct and heavy-handed tactics only when something critical to their plans is at stake. Otherwise, they prefer to use the same indirect methods on their puppet counselors, working through intermediaries and agents to achieve the desired result. They are naturally careful not to have the council members do anything so outrageous that suspicion falls on them. Instead, they utilize their pet counselors to make small but strategically important moves in the city that have long-term benefit to the Nightmasks, such as refusing to vote in favor of a budget increase for the City Watch, voting to appoint a certain person to a sensitive city office, or making sure that a particular nephew is appointed to a cushy job as a scribe in the hall, where the city's property records are kept. In this fashion, and through such incremental accomplishments, do the Nightmasks gain more control over their city. Since completing the formation of his court of Nightmasters, Orbach has permitted his servitors to create minor vampires of their own. The resulting undead population explosion has led to certain difficulties that, while currently in hand, may one night lead to complications. The most obvious issue is feeding. Even in a metropolis such as Westgate, the presence of so many vampires can be problematic. The Night King desires that the existence of the vampire coven remain hidden from the mortals of the city, for now, and sloppy feeding habits could lead to exposure. The Vampire Lord therefore enforces strict rules that dictate when and where the vampires may feed, so that their hunting does not attract undue attention. His most inviolable rule is that no evidence of the vampires feasting be left for the mortals to discover. All corpses must be disposed of in a fashion that does not cause the populace to suspect that vampires are among them. Even with these precautions, the rising number of disappearances that the growing vampire population inevitably produces, and the problem undoubtedly grows worse when word spreads among vampires living elsewhere that Westgate offers opportunities for their kind, may well cause complications for the Night King. The Night King knows that several popular misconceptions about vampires exist that aid him and his brood should the worst occur, and their presence be discovered. One important misconception is that vampires must return to their coffins at dawn and remain within them, sleeping during the day. This is a fallacy, but one that Orbach is content to propagate. The truth is that vampires are as active in the daylight hours as they are at night. They are undead creatures and do not require sleep. Thus, it is quite possible for a vampire to meet with a mortal minion, stalk a victim, conduct research, or meet with other vampires during daylight hours. However, it is true that direct sunlight is dangerous, even fatal to them, and they must avoid it. But provided that they do not enter direct sunlight, they may do as they please, and all their powers remain completely operative. Hence, most of the vampires in the city stay in the dark places below the streets and conduct their business there as well. They maintain lairs that are well protected from direct sunlight. Many of them are in the four-forged sewers and deep catacombs that riddle the ground below Westgate. The vampires take care to avoid any areas of running water, of course. The night masks consider any who hinder their nightly goals and operations to be their enemies and deal with them quickly and decisively. The caravan merchant who attempts to undercut the guild by smuggling goods into the city without permission from the Count of Storms is the enemy of the night masks. Once discovered, that merchant dies and his goods are confiscated. The weapons merchant who fails behind in his protection payments is the enemy of the night masks. The do-gooder adventurers who can't seem to resist sticking their noses where they don't belong are the enemies of the night masks. Maybe they find themselves framed for a burglary and cast into the city dungeons. Or perhaps they are murdered in their beds as they sleep. A particularly troublesome adventurer might merit the attention of a lieutenant, or possibly, if the interloper is very unlucky, the court of night masters. As for more specific foes, the one garnering the lion's share of the night master's attention at this time is High Lord Abbot Grigor Kazan, a militant cleric of Tyr. Based at the newly constructed Abbey of the Blinding Truth in the King's March, the High Lord Abbot and his clergy have made it their business to interfere with night masks' operations whenever possible. Clerics, monks, and paladins devoted to the just deity have clashed increasingly with operatives of the Thieves' Guild in recent months, and the night masks have suffered from these altercations. The night masters are more than a little concerned about this. All attempts to infiltrate the new abbey or acquire hard information about the religious leader and his temple's defences have proven ineffectual, leaving the organisation without adequate intelligence about this threat. The Night King himself is aware of the danger posed by these interfering moralists, and while he dares not show it openly, he, too, is troubled. If the cleric discovers the true nature of the Faceless, he might bring all his resources to bear in an attempt to topple the night masks. The High Lord Abbot has gone so far as to lobby the members of the Noble Council in an attempt to convince them to wake up and realise the injustice that is being perpetrated daily in the city streets, often by agents of the council. Grigor seems to have found a sympathetic ear in old Thistle Thalavar, the most conservative member of the council. Thistle Thalavar has reported to her master Orbach that Circus has several times in recent nights invited the High Lord Abbot to dine with him privately, and once attended a service at the Abbey's chapel. Orbach has considered ordering Grigor Kazar's assassination, but has delayed for fear that the cleric's martyrdom could bring even greater numbers of Tyr's followers to the city. Perhaps the most consistent and troublesome enemies of the Night Masks are the Harpers. Ironically, the Night King's campaign to become the Faceless was made possible when those who harp toppled his predecessor. Despite this assistance, he feels no gratitude toward these meddlers. Anyone suspected of being a harper must be reported through channels until the news reaches the ears of the Duke of Whispers, whose task it is to confirm the information. A half-dozen harpers have been identified since this edict was issued, each one apprehended in turn and brought before the Court of Nightmasters for a brief but thorough interrogation before being drained of every last drop of blood. Unsurprisingly, the Night Masks' campaign of aggression in the organised crime syndicates of various cities has attracted the attention and opposition of merchant societies such as the Knights of the Shield, the Men of the Basilisk, and the Rundine. Thus far, however, none of these enemies has been able to deliver any meaningful blows to the Night Masks' operation. I will be the Vampire Lestat for all to see. A symbol, a freak of nature, something loved, something despised, all of those things. I tell you, I can't give it up. I can't miss. And quite frankly, I am not in the least afraid, for I am a night mask forever and always.